U.S. President Joe Biden has used his address for the Muslim Eid al-Adha holiday to press for a ceasefire in Gaza. Biden said a pause in fighting was the best way to save civilians from the horror of the conflict. In Gaza itself, another 9 Palestinians were killed in an Israeli strike. The attack came after the Israeli military said it would implement a daily tactical pause along a road in southern Gaza to allow aid deliveries.
Praying among the ruins, Palestinians marking a somber Eid in Gaza, where over 80% of the population is living in displacement. This family sheltering at a UN school in Khan Yunis says there's little left to celebrate.
Other people are just living their lives. They get to celebrate Eid, to sacrifice animals. Here, there is no Eid. There are no signs of celebrations, no mass prayers. We wake up and sleep to the sound of strikes.
Disrupting a relative calm, an Israeli airstrike hit the Burej camp, killing a number of people, including children, according to a nearby hospital.
What did this girl do to you, Netanyahu? Shame on you!
On the Israeli side of the Kerem Shalom crossing with Gaza, 8 trucks were spotted after Israel announced a tactical pause in fighting near Rafah to facilitate deliveries. The 11-hour pauses apply to a 12-kilometer stretch. That's the main gateway for humanitarian aid into the territory. The tactical pause announcement came a day after 8 Israeli soldiers were killed in a blast near the far southern city. Israel's Druze minority held a funeral for one of them, Captain Wasim Mahmoud.
The preparations for Eid have become preparations to receive hundreds of people here to offer condolences and prepare the funeral.
With the latest fatalities, Israel's military has recorded a total of 310 deaths since the beginning of its ground offensive in October, while Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry says more than 37,000 Palestinians have been killed. After 8 months of a devastating war, the tactical pause falls short of a complete ceasefire called for by the international community, including Israel's closest ally, the U.S.
Well, for more on this, we're joined now by our correspondent, Rebecca Ritters in Jerusalem. Rebecca, it seems Israel's military and its government don't really see eye to eye on the issue of tactical pauses. What more can you tell us?
Yeah, that's right, Terry. So we heard this announcement early yesterday that this pause, this tactical pause along this humanitarian route would be coming into effect immediately. In fact, the message said that it had already come into effect and was had already happened on Saturday. We weren't sure immediately whether or not this was coordinated with the government, but very shortly after this announcement was made, it was met with a furious response from some members of the far-right coalition, Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition, where there are many far-right parties, and particularly National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir. He came out saying whoever made this decision was a fool and that it was evil. The Finance Minister, Bezalel Smotrich, came out and said that this would undo all the good work that they've done against Hamas, and this would take away from their victories. And shortly afterwards, we heard reportedly from the Prime Minister's office that Benjamin Netanyahu was furious about this decision and that he had not been party to it. The latest that I've been able to ascertain from the Israeli military is that they have maintained this statement. And we certainly heard from people on the ground, eyewitness reports saying that yesterday was a relatively calm day in Gaza and that there had been fewer airstrikes and fewer on-the-ground fighting, or less, I should say. So, we believe at this stage that it has been, the military didn't confirm with me that it was completely carried out and that it would continue, but they said that this statement, they stand by it and they're maintaining it. So whether or not, just how long it will last, we still don't know because, as we've seen, the government is countering what the military are doing and they're saying they're unhappy with it. So it may well end, but at the moment it does appear to be ongoing.
So a pause ongoing. How much could if there are more pauses, how much could these pauses actually help people in Gaza, Rebecca?
Well, it's certainly, been welcomed. This news has been welcomed by the international community, by humanitarian organisations who, we're told, coordinated with the military on the route and some of the details about this pause. They have long been calling for more humanitarian aid to be allowed in. We know since the Rafah operation began in early May that the number of trucks that were already insignificant and not enough to fulfil the requirements inside Gaza, but they were before the operation were hovering around 160, 170 a day. They dropped after the Rafah incursion to just a little under 70 a day. So huge drop. Aid agencies saying that 500 trucks a day need to go into Gaza. In fact, 600 trucks really need to go into Gaza. But before the war, 500 trucks were going through. Now, that's not a lot of numbers, but it does show you the difference of aid, the amount of aid that needs to go in versus what's going in. So obviously aid agencies say this will make a huge difference, but it won't solve the problem overall. There are still many other issues when it comes to aid distribution, including criminality, desperate people, trying to pilfer what aid is coming through on those trucks. So there are still many other issues when it comes to getting this aid in. We know the $300 million JLOTS, as it's known, this pier, that US-built pier, has barely been in operation since they finished that a few months ago. And so the only way to get aid in is through these land crossings. The few aid drops that have been coming into are also woefully inadequate. So hopefully, obviously aid organisations are hopeful, but they do say this is not going to solve the crisis on its own.
Rebecca, thank you. That was our correspondent, Rebecca Ritters, in Jerusalem. Well, for more on this, we can talk now with Shaina Low. She's a communications advisor for the Norwegian Refugee Council, which is active in the Gaza Strip. She joins us from Jerusalem. Shaina, do you think these tactical pauses that the Israeli military has announced will help civilians in Gaza?
Well, Terry, I think it's important that aid be able to actually reach the aid agencies once it enters Gaza. But whether or not these tactical pauses will allow us to be able to safely distribute aid to all people throughout Gaza is unclear and unlikely, considering that Israel has been very clear that these so-called tactical pauses will only occur along that small corridor. What we need in order to really make an impact and start to meet the growing needs in Gaza, the continuously growing needs in Gaza, is a complete ceasefire so that we can guarantee the safety and security of aid workers and people coming to seek aid at distribution points. We need a scaling up, massive scaling up of the amount of aid that's coming in, which is woefully inadequate. We've been conditioned at this point to be cheering on these tiny cosmetic changes and forgetting to continue to push that we need much bigger things, a ceasefire, safety for humanitarians, and a scaling up of aid.
So you say that more of these arrangements need to be made elsewhere in the Gaza Strip. They shouldn't just apply to that area down in the south. How freely can aid workers move around the Gaza Strip at the moment?
It's very, very difficult for aid workers to move around the Gaza Strip and be assured of their safety. The notification and coordination system, deconfliction system with Israel is broken. Sometimes it takes hours for us to get approval to move, and by the time that we've gotten approval, it's too late in the day. Either the place that we are going has been closed, it's after dark when our staff is not able to move. Everything is just taking far too long. Staff members are getting delayed at checkpoints. Humanitarian agencies simply cannot function under the current circumstances to any impactful degree.
Now, relief supplies are piling up at many border crossings, I understand. How quickly can those supplies be brought to where they are needed most?
Well, this tactical pause along this route will allow for us to be able to go and get some of the aid that has been piling up on the Gaza side of the crossing. Once we're able to receive that aid and take account of what exactly it is that we've received, then we can start immediately going and distributing at the sites. We've already, over the last several weeks, been visiting new IDP sites for internally displaced people, assessing the needs. Of course, everywhere in Gaza, there's tremendous need. So once we're able to access that aid, we will do our best to try and distribute it as quickly as possible.
What about the kind of aid that is getting into Gaza and should be getting into Gaza? What kind of aid is most urgently needed in Gaza right now?
The most urgent aid, of course, is food and medicine, as we see that more than half of Gaza is on the brink of starvation, that famine is looming, if not already present in parts of Gaza. So we need food and medicine. But on top of that, with so many people displaced since Israel announced its Rafah operation in May and started issuing these so-called evacuation orders calling on people to leave, we have a huge need for shelter materials. People are sleeping in tents. People are sleeping in makeshift shelters with whatever salvaged materials they can find. And many people are just simply sleeping on the streets because they have nowhere to sleep. And so shelter materials are essential. Water, sanitation, and hygiene materials are needed because there's a sewage problem, there's a sanitation problem. Basically, everything is needed in Gaza at this point. But of course, given the number of people suffering from food insecurity, we need to see a massive scaling up of food into Gaza.
Shaina, thank you very much for talking with us. That was Shaina Low of the Norwegian Refugee Council speaking to us from Jerusalem.